I'm going to give us a visual overview also because some of the slides have some imagery that can be helpful to all of you who are in sex coaching. I pulled out a couple things that are really my gems that have made a difference. So we'll kind of power through that. If you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll circle around. But my goal is to get through the presentation and then really open it up for us to have a conversation, to have the students, all of you. I'm so grateful you're all here. I actually was part of the SCU community back in 2020, 21, probably even to 2022. I was a demo child, I guess would be, in that I hadn't been a student, but I was brought in the first year of the BOSS program. And that's where I got to meet both you two wonderful women and so many other really special people in my heart and really built new collaboration. So I'm super excited to be sharing all of this today with all of you.
Perfect. Let's get started. Erica, Jordan and I are going to jump off while you give your visual presentation. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, let's but you know what, before you jump off, let's do this. Right? Okay, because let's just acknowledge that there's a lot of change happening in the world, and I know we have people from all over the world who are, part of this. But it's an interesting. I woke up this morning and I looked at the news and I thought, well, it's a really interesting day to talk about dick, you know, and to especially be coming from a place of compassion towards men and masculinity, that there's going to be a lot of energy around us that is going to be focused on sort of this idea of toxic masculinity. And so much of the work that we do in the work of intimacy and pleasure and compassion is to provide space for men who aren't living in that as their truth. And, so that's some of what we'll be talking about today. But I just want to acknowledge that, what we do, those of us who choose to work with men, are really doing transformative world peace, world love work. I mean, obviously, any work that we do is that, but not everyone chooses to work with this population, and that's part of why I'm here, is to encourage more of us to do that. And then the other thing, before I take the slide and have both of you on screen and really invite everybody to do, is a somatic. So I'm a somatic practitioner. I have been for my entire life, and I'll tell you more about that as we go. But let's just start with being in our bodies. So I'm going to invite everybody to just notice that we're all sitting in somewhere. We're sitting in a chair, we're sitting on a couch, wherever you are, unless you're standing, but wherever you are, let's assume everybody is sitting. Just notice, first of all, your feet on the ground. Bring your awareness to the fact that your feet are touching something. And bring your awareness to the fact that your thighs, your butt, your back are also touching something, that you have support. You're not just hanging out here in the wild world of life, that you have support directly underneath you. And with that knowledge and that awareness, is there something that you can shift to be even just 10% more comfortable, right? As you're watching, as you're listening, right? What can you do? Just, we all came to the screen. So what can you do to just let yourself, okay, I'm being invited to just be a little bit more relaxed. It doesn't have to be a lot. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. So what can you do to just be a little bit more relaxed? And in that, let's just also invite, because this is Sex Coach You and because I am a somatic sexological body worker, let's also just invite our genital tissue to also be present, right? That's something that not everybody invites. So again, notice what you have there in your genital tissue, that's also touching the chair. That's also making contact. It's also present. It's part of us, that in this period of time that we have together, it's an invitation for us to be 100% invited and whole. So often our genital tissue isn't invited to the day-to-day life. So we're going to just invite it also to hear what we're talking about. And if it has questions, right, listen in. Maybe that's where the question arises, is from deep inside that core little place of the genital tissue saying, ooh, how about this, Erica? How about that? And put that in the chat later too. Okay, so we're in our bodies. We're ready to go. Good. All right. Let me bring us to my presentation. Okay. Let me get us big. Here we go. Present, present. All right. You with me? We can all see the screen. We're good.
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, good. All right. So my name is Erica Leroy, and as Amanda already hinted at, it is a delicious coincidence that the letters behind my name are MED. I do have a master's in education, but I am right now a master of erectile dysfunction. I'm a certified, this is how I currently identify. My business is Creative Body Release. It is a name that I gave it in 1991 when I first started as a massage therapist and a clinical herbalist, working predominantly with women who have infertility issues. Um, I am a certified sexological body worker. I am a sensory motor movement educator and a soft skills and performance coach. This is my card where I don't say what I really am, which is an erotic performance coach. Um, my business, the way I have finally come up with my wording, and I'm sharing all this with you because I know this is part of what you do in the BOSS program is how do you name yourself? What is this? So after many iterations, I'm a sexual health and well-being guide for men and those who love them. Okay, there we go. So I want to just do a quick disclaimer that we're going to use pretty gendered language here today because my clients are predominantly cis men. They're not all cis het men, but they generally are cis men. And the women that I work with are also, they're generally in the navigating poly open community. But that is the bulk of the people that I work with, the experience that I have. So when I'm saying men, obviously not everybody with a penis identifies as being a man, and not every man has a penis. But for today, we're really talking about the cis male population. That said, everybody has erectile tissue. So when we're talking about erectile function and things that affect erectile function, that could be clitoral, that could be, people who've had the different transition surgeries, phalloplasty, metiodoplasty. So just be aware that, hopefully, even if this isn't the population that you work with, that you can pull some things from this. We all, when we come into Sex Coach U, when we come into this work, we all have a history of what we've done. I'm not going to read through my whole list, but I I'm 55. I've come to this work with a lot of background, predominantly in alternative health, alternative well-being, alternative education, spirituality. So a lot of my approach and what I'm sharing with you today is the sexological bodywork is the icing on the cake or the cherry on the sundae. But I've always been interested in human bodies and human development and how the prenatal through death and dying, what does it mean? As I like to say to my children, the only thing that we know for sure is that you come in and you go out, and everything else is kind of a crapshoot. So, how we make the most of that journey, that's really about our actions and reactions. And that's a whole lifetime to be able to learn how to control. But a lot of the work that I do comes from my work prior to becoming a sexological body worker, which was in Waldorf and non-traditional pedagogies. I worked in education for about 15 years. I did adult programming, early childhood. And then I got into education activism, where I was designing a new charter high school. During that, let's see, there we go. During that time, so this is about 2009 to 2011, I was absolutely on top of the world. I had received government money. I had pulled a community together. We were transforming our city. And in that, I also fell in love. And I had already been married twice. And I met this incredible man. We fell in love. It was like the most perfect love ever. Everything was going great. And then diabetes came. And my partner, as Amanda mentioned in my bio, died suddenly in his sleep at the age of 42 from undiagnosed diabetes. And my whole world came crashing down. The project that we were working on together fell apart. Everything, the grief, the loss was just so much for our entire community that everything just really just fell apart, which is what happens in life. And as a result of this, I really became like, what did I miss? Like, how could he have just died in his sleep? Like, what in the world? And, the statistics, especially for members of the Black community, are pretty amazing. We have, high rates of diabetes, high rates of prostate cancer, high rates of heart disease. And in that, the common theme of those three in particular is all of those impact erectile function. And with my partner, when we first met, he had ED and he attributed it to something psychological that his partner, his wife, when they were getting divorced, said some mean things about his penis and that he never really, that was really the catalyst. And so in the course of our relationship, I was really tender and gentle, and and I didn't want to touch on that psychological. That however his penis showed up was 100% okay, and it really was phenomenal in that it changed our sex life. I had never had sex like that because it wasn't all about penetration. We were discovering every time we were together new ways to enjoy pleasure, and the focus on penetration wasn't there. But I was aware the whole time that something was going on because he very rarely ejaculated. And I personally like the orgasm I have when somebody ejaculates inside me. And I was aware of it. But again, I didn't want to say something's wrong and add to that psychological piece. But when I was in my what did I miss, and I became what I now call a detective. Retrograde ejaculation is one of the early tells of diabetes. And retrograde ejaculation, for those of you who maybe it's not a familiar term, although I imagine that it's in your studies, is when the ejaculate gets absorbed back into the body rather than ejaculating out the urethral tube. And so for my partner, he was like, oh, this is like Tantra, right? I can have multiple orgasms and my erections are hard again. And it's great. I'm not ejaculating. I can just keep having more and more and more and more pleasure. But in hindsight, my not wanting to create pressure on him was the not opening up the conversation of could there be something. And so I really became devastated at, what did I miss and how can I help so that other people don't go through what I went through. So I went to the sexological bodywork route. I was done with education. I was disheartened and disillusioned. And also, I was really sick. Grief can really do a number on people. And I got very, very, very ill. And my cortisol, my adrenaline, my norepinephrine were super high, and my oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine were low. And this is an image that I want to give all of you because this is something that I talk about a lot with my clients, that I imagine that we all have two IV bags running, in our body mind. One of them is cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine. The other is oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine. And if we were just mammals, not human mammals, we'd mostly be in this strip. And when there was actual threat, we would be in this one. But as human mammals, we're often feeling like we're in threat. And we have to learn how to get the juiciness and we have to do things intentionally to get the oxytocin, serotonin, and dopamine going. And so obviously pleasure, masturbation, all of those things help. But the number one thing that I have found that helps us switch from the cortisol to the oxytocin is curiosity. And I like to say curiosity may kill the cat, but it makes the pussy purr. And what I mean by that is you can be saying, and you'll see this with a lot of your clients, especially if you work with ED clients, is this intense anxiety and fear around, I don't know if I'm ever going to get my function back. Right. And so the body goes, I don't know. And the energy goes, I don't know, or I'm so afraid. But if you take the same words and you add a little, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ever going to get it back, but I wonder what is possible. I wonder if it'll happen. And so the more that we in our work as sex coaches and providers start to bring in those examples of, I wonder, oh, I'm curious, you can see it. I just had a client yesterday where he was so afraid, and just giving him this change and asking him to change his sentence from, I'm so afraid to, I'm so curious. And he wrote me later and said, oh my God, that made all the difference in the world. It's so really big stuff. And when we model curiosity and wonder, it's a game changer, especially for the men that we work with. All right, so here we go. This is what generally is the first thing that I experience in working with men is that when they come to us, those of us who do alternative work, which all of you are doing, right? You are not in the traditional ED system. They generally have gone every which way. They've gone to their doctor, they've gone to their urologist, they've gone to their general, they've gone to specialists, they've gone maybe to sex therapists, they've read things online. They've done pretty much everything but talk to one another. And the what I like to say is we have this general problem with cock confusion. The cock is like, oh my gosh, why, like what are we doing? And the man is also just really lost. And so our job, the way I think of our job is to be able to help create the picture that is the whole of the parts. Because again, this is just when you are in this place, you cannot see the grand vision of what's possible. You're so afraid that this is always going to be your reality. So I looked this up because I think, our job is to help them create the picture. A lot of men right now, especially if they're in that state, are in a crisis of lack of imagination. I do not have a vision that I can be anything different. I always had my cock like this. Now my dick isn't working like this. And I don't see what's possible. And it's interesting that I looked this up yesterday because I was curious what it is, this thing that I'm saying we are. And it's actually called came. And the archaic word for that is calm, right? The calm. And that is what we are, right? Our job is working, especially with these men who are so isolated and afraid when they come to us with erectile function, or they're angry at the system that has nothing for them. That our job is really to create a sense of calm, to give them an opportunity to learn how to downregulate their nervous system, because a downregulated nervous system is more likely to bring blood flow. It's more likely to bring nerve energy down that can do some remediation. So we are the calm and we give the picture. So I'm bringing this piece in because this is something that I do in my intake. And I want to give you a couple like boss types of things as we go along here. So this is my intake, which is I ask men, imagine that you are at the edge of a body of water and you have been on a land that has been leading you to this edge. And on the other side of this body of water is another land. And this is the land that you've heard of, that you want to get to, that you think you know what's there. And I asked them to describe to me, to tell me the story of their erotic adventure, their erotic exploration, who they are in their sexuality that has brought them to to this edge. And then what is it that they see or they want to experience in this other land that they are trying to get to? And I do this because this helps me know in the way they tell their story, oh, you just need one session for me to hold your hand across a creek, right? Or this is going to be, a year of building a bridge, or this is going to be a journey where I need to get, the cruise ship and we're going to be going island to island to island all across the seas. So it's helpful. And all the men that I've worked with have really appreciated being given this kind of imagery at the start of what we do, that we're on a journey together, we're on a quest, that I'm their guide, that they don't have to know it, and that I'm there with them. Yeah. Now, a lot of times working with men, especially if you are female identified, we get nervous about working with them because there are some bad apples that are out there. But what I've learned is that most of the bad apples that are out there, it's because of lack of boundaries. And often it has to do with lack of my boundaries, that when I'm not clear, when my boundaries aren't clear, that's where there's some pushing. And I had a parent back when I was a teacher who gave me a really good piece of advice that travels into what we do, which is she said, boys need to know who's in charge, what are the rules, and what are the consequences if I break them. And if you don't lay that out up front, then they will spend most of their time trying to get the answer to those rules and not be able to relax and listen and learn. And so doing the work that you do in Boss around, having the guidelines, knowing what the structure is really helpful also, because then your clients, and especially the clients who have this boundary pushing quality to them, can either relax or know that you're not the right one because your boundaries are clear and good. And also, I want to say this idea of, who they are, what are the rules, what are the consequences if I break them, who's in charge. That really is for anybody, any gender who has had, childhood trauma, any type of adverse childhood experience. They really need to know that we're walking our talk, that we don't have hypocrisy in what we do. And then that helps to downregulate the nervous system too. And the reality of what I've found is that most of the men that I work with, where we're working with the penis and anything coming up with the penis, we're working with the whole developmental trajectory. So understanding and knowing and having a sense of child development and compassion for, all these little boys. There was a time where they got to be full-bodied little boys. My grandchildren who, will watch TV with their hands down their pants and have joy in their penis. And at a very young age, we ask boys, to have control over their body. Do not let your penis get hard when you see a butterfly, when you smell something that smells good, when somebody hugs you, right? The dissociation begins very young. And part of our work is to bring them back. I like to use these types of words because just like when boys are young and we give the penis different kinds of silly names, it sometimes it helps them get out of their head and think a little bit more expansively. And the work of ED is to help with expansion. Um, so the words I like are barometer, right? That the penis is a barometer. It's a rudder. It's a metronome. It's a compass. It's an antenna. It's a scepter. I'm sure in the chat you can put some other things that you can think of that when you think of what else can we call the penis that can be helpful for people. So for instance, with the rudder, I say, life can be very much like, it's taking you, the current can be taking you off balance, but you always can hold on to the rudder and be the navigator, and that your rudder is there for pleasure. So your masturbation practice is a way to actually stay balanced and grounded. So what I've found, and this is where we're just going to kind of go through some things, is that these are the things that in my 12 plus years of working with many, many, many men, these are the keys to erectile dysfunction that aren't the pills, the pumps, the injections, that are really making a difference, and that are all things that you can do as sex coaches and be aware of as sex coaches. So number one is penis anatomy. Most men only know their penis from what their experiences of touching it. And actually, maybe there was some sex ed in their life, but they don't really go into it. And so the things like I give this diagram to almost everybody right at the beginning, because again, the work that I do is a lot of masturbation coaching, but we're really getting into let's make sure that you understand what the penis is and how it works. So first of all, it's important that we all have in mind that we have spongy tissue, right? So it's just like a kitchen sponge, it expands and it contracts. Around the penis is fascia. Fascia is like that's this blue line here, that's called Buck's fascia. And it's like a sausage casing. So if it's tight, then the penis can only grow as much as the fascia can expand. And all of this, see this green line here? All of this surrounding area is fascia. So we want that to be relaxed and pliable. And part of the way we do that is through touch, through sensory stimulation. The other thing, this is the huge game changer for so many of the men that I work with. It has to do with the internal structure of the penis. So many, both men and women, kind of relate to the penis only with what's hanging on the front, right? What's hanging out on the outside of the pelvis. But if you look inside of the pelvis is quite a bit of internal penis, right? It comes here, here's the testicles, here's the anus, and this tissue all in here is that engorgement tissue that I just showed you, right? That's inside. So if you think of a scaffold, right? If we look down here at the erection, what's going to happen to, when you're younger, it's different. But as you get older, especially in andropause, as men's bodies change and they get a little bit more of that belly and there's compression on the pelvis, then this tissue doesn't engorge as much. And so, you know, if you don't have a scaffolding for that penis to grow on, what's going to happen, right? You may get some hardness, but if everything under here is, you know, it's hard to show, right? If everything under there is kind of tight or loose, it's not going to stay up, right? That's where you're going to get clients who are going to say, you know, I can get an erection, but I can't maintain an erection, right? And so this area of asking them, you know, what are they doing to massage that area, to open that area up? Is their pelvic floor tight? And even if they don't need to go to pelvic floor PT, these are things that you can do in terms of giving some cues of, oh, let's just even be aware. This, I have men that have been like, this alone has made a huge difference. That once they start massaging that area, when they are aroused, connecting to that area, and they're able to really have erections that they hadn't had for years. Okay, and again, so I mentioned about that all of this is fascia, right? And here again is that internal structure, so you can see it a little bit more, that spongy tissue that we want to help grow. And then over here, I wanted to point this out. So this area right here, right? So here's the fascia, the blue line, and then around this kind of white area here is called the tunica albuginea. And it surrounds specifically the corpus cavernosa, which is the blood area, the big part for blood flow. And the tunica albuginea has oxytocin receptors. And I mentioned oxytocin briefly before, and I know Jordan and Amanda, we'll get into my relationship with oxytocin. But one of the things that you'll hear me say often, if you listen to podcasts or things I've been interviewed on, is whenever I see the penis, I always like when I have my first encounter with it every single time, I always say, hi, hello. It's so nice to see you. Literally, I will say that out loud, but it's because oxytocin likes smooth, it likes warm voice, eye contact, soothing touch. All the things that you do to soothe a fussy baby is what helps oxytocin come out. And oxytocin, the tunica has all these oxytocin receptors. So if we want that expansion of the buccal fascia, right? If we're thinking about that sausage casing, if we want all of that to help expand, the way that we invite, if you're working with, maybe you're working with the partners of someone with a penis, and or you're working with couples, that the energy of oxytocin, the energy of the invitation of the love actually does a physiological thing for the penile tissue. All right, this one is another one that is just, I'm giving this one to you as an image that can be helpful with your clients and the people that you work with, which is a lot of people think of the penis as just hanging on the outside of the pelvis. But if we think of it instead of the body, of the spine like a fish hook or the spine like a J, and that the penis is actually the end of the spine, then as we're stroking, as we're touching, and we're thinking about how the spine is coming through the pelvis and can help bring some of that erectile tissue up, it changes the way people stroke and the way people touch. And this again, I mean, not only that, but I have been able in my work, you know, and I know you're not touch professionals, but in my work, I've been able to change some people's spinal like alignment through the way that we work with the penis. Again, because all of it, you know, we have all the fascia and connective tissue as well. But this is really helpful if you just if you give them any image of, think of your penis more as the end of the spine, as a J, as a fish hook, and the way that you touch, it creates opportunity for a little bit more growth. And again, gets that inner tissue to come forward too. And this is a thing, right? Most of the men that I see are just stiff in all the wrong places. And this is something that they appreciate me saying. So the next P, right? I said, the first was just penis anatomy, and now we're moving into posture and proprioception. So if you look at this, I love this image because two things. One is posture is something that, again, even if you're not a touch professional, it's so easy to work with because you're going to see it. You're going to see it on the screen. You're going to see it on the chair. You're going to see it in the people that you work with. And men tend to really kind of come up in their shoulders and up out of their bodies, out of their pelvis. And so everything is drawing up and away, which often makes the lower back and the lower abdomen very, very tight and constricted. And so that alone is limiting blood flow and nerve impulse into the body. We also, this is something I share with all the time, is their penises are pushed into briefs and underwear, and they're often to the side and are kind of crammed into pants. And so all of those things can affect penile function as well. So helping your clients think about, like, now they have underwear that has a pouch in the front, and just something like that can start to make a difference. Because again, what I was showing you with the fascia is if the fascia is twisted and kind of off to the side, then that can impact how much engorgement can happen, how much nerve stimulation can be felt. And proprioception is the ability to kind of know what's happening with your body in space. And again, when I mentioned how we ask little boys at a young age to disconnect, that many men really are struggling with proprioception. That when you ask them, like the exercise I did with us all in the beginning, when I say feel your feet on the ground, what do you notice? I get a lot of, I don't know, I can't feel, I'm not sure, because this part of what we do to young boys by cutting them off out of fear of, having erections in school, in the workplace, is that we cut off the proprioceptive sense. So if that's something that is interesting to you, the world of sensory motor education or sensory motor integration has lots of great books and tools that you can research and learn more about. But let's just look at this. We have lots and lots of different posture. And if you start to think about how men sit, stand, lay, and ask yourself, because again, we're curious and we're detectives, ask yourself, if I was sitting like that, what would the experience be for the penis? If I was sitting like that, what would it be for the perineum? And just being able to start doing some slight postural correction can really, because we're building new habits, can really start to change erectile function. I also always ask the men that I work with if they played sports as a child and what sport they played. And I do this for two reasons. One is because that often that becomes a story of injury, um, or and an early relationship to their body, and it also gives me analogies and information about how best to talk with them about what I'm going to show you in a few minutes. So the next P is pathways for pain and pleasure. I'm not going to go into too much of this. I just want to say this because, again, it's just a very simple tool that I want to give to you all, which is that, the nerves are the nerves are the nerves, that there aren't nerves for pleasure and nerves for pain. We just have nerves. We have what are called afferent nerves, which are on the ends, right, on our skin. They send signals to the brain, and then the brain has efferent nerves that send signals back to our parts. So when we think especially about the genitals and genital tissue, which is filled with, hundreds of thousands of nerve endings, that generally we're asking those nerve endings to be in a state of off, right? We don't want consistent, persistent arousal. We want them to be neutral. And then, it's easier for them to send pain signals than it is often for them to send pleasure signals. But it is helpful for clients to really know, like, oh, it's just a pathway, it's just a nerve. And so I do something where I ask them to activate one hand as the hand of the lover. And when they touch themselves, whether it's their face or their shoulder or this part of the inner thigh is full of, really rich nerve endings. But that they start to practice that there's a giving hand and a receiving body, and that the quality of that hand and the quality of that touch can start to do that oxytocin and serotonin awakening of the invitation for pleasure. Okay, the next P is perception. So most men only know what they see in the mirror, what their own parts are, and what they see, on screen, in movies, in porn, in erotica, on the if they're reading something. But unless, if you're working especially with cis het men and not bi or homosexual men, then they're really stuck with, like, all they know is what they know. And so it's so important. Our job, those of us who work with men, is really to be giving, that broader perspective. That's probably the other, that's another P, perception perspective, because otherwise they're all thinking this is what they think. If they have ED, they think they are the only one, and that everybody else, is walking around like this guy. And it's, knowing the stats, having the stats kind of ready there for you, that because men, a lot of them are logical. And it takes, I really have to go with like, here's the prostate cancer research study and here's the erectile study so that we can give them the information and not just all the nice gushy stuff to help them out. And medicine isn't helping us. The medical model, I mean, look at this. This is the erectile hardness scale that is used in medicine, right? That this is what we're calling erectile dysfunction. And I don't know about you, but I don't really think that the penis is a smoothie. And I can have sex with tofu. I can have sex with a peeled banana, an unpeeled banana, and a cucumber. I don't need it. We don't need, I mean, look at what we're saying. This is that a banana, the quality of a banana is suboptimal, right? That this banana that's peeled, if you really actually touch a peeled banana, you can have penetration. This is not moderate erectile dysfunction, and even the tofu, there's so much that we can do with a soft penis that, and I mean, this is like semi hard, right? But this really does a number on them. So the next piece is about performance, and performance gets a really bad rap because we get into performance anxiety. And I think especially as sex educators, we want to like ease off the performance piece. But performance is also, I like to think of it in relationship to sports and arts. I come from an arts background. And so that connects to masturbation, and how you masturbate matters. And the thing I always say to my clients, and it really, really helps, so I want to give this one to you too, is you have to practice for what you want to be good at. It's very basic sports psychology. You want to imagine yourself doing well, right? Now, no negative self-talk, no negative imaging. You want to practice for what you want to be good at. So in terms of the connection between masturbation and partnered sex, I always say you can't be a gold medal high jumper if you spend your time doing butterfly stroke in the pool. That you need to practice for the position. So I ask them, what are the positions that you use? What are the positions that you would like to use? And then we start to imagine, and again, you can do this as a hands-off provider. You know, well, if the way that you masturbate is always in a chair in front of the computer, um, when does not, I don't want to call it real, because all sex is real. So, but when does partnered sex, what does it look like in that position? When would you actually be sitting? Oh, here's an example. I'd be sitting if I was, in a sitting position with someone on top of me. Okay, so then what would that be like? How would your body be moving? What would your stroke pattern be like to start simulating that, right? That we want to, and not all the time. You can still have practice sessions where it's more like what you've always done since you first discovered your penis, or it's a quickie, or it's whatever. But, as we start to create routines that are more closely aligned with what we want to be able to do, how we want to perform, that also really eases anxiety. The men that I work with who come in with performance anxiety and performance pressure, when we start to just normalize that, a lot of them go to the gym, they know how to prepare for activity. And we just have this thing in our world where we don't think of sex. Sex is so laden with so much other stuff that we don't think of it, just it's a movement activity. And so we need to treat it sometimes just like that. So now we get to pleasure. One of the things that comes up then, and especially for people with ED, where maybe they're trying to expand, is there's a lot of questions that men have. Like there just aren't as many, there's a lot of isolation around pleasure seeking. So is it okay that I like to wear women's lingerie? Is it okay that I like to touch my butt? Is it okay that this is the kind of porn I watch, or that this is what I want to listen to, or that, I mean, those questions, to be able to provide a place where the pursuit of pleasure is really, for so many men that I work with, part of the change of their erectile function is just being able to have somebody that they can ask their questions and be told, yeah, absolutely, this is fine. This is good. You're good. It's okay. And especially if they grew up, I work with a lot of people who grew up Catholic or Mormon or, or Muslim, and having a voice that says, this is okay. This is a safe place to try this. And you don't have to be completely out, but this is a place. So finally, there's many D's in ED, right? We know that there's, dysfunction, and absolutely, I always, 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 because of my history, one of the first questions I always ask men is, Have you seen a doctor? What tests have you done? What do we need to run? Let's get all the physical information that we can, especially if you have health insurance. And if you don't, what are the clinics or what are the ways I can help resource you for that? We always want to rule out the physical because we don't want to do any behavior modification if there's something physical there, because you're just going to be another one of those arrows on my first, on that slide. If you are trying to get them to change something when there really is something going on, when there really is diabetes or there really is heart disease. So we want to make sure we help them do that. But look at this. And I want you to put in the chat the other D's you can think of. I mean, these are words that we don't generally think about when we think about what men are going through. Disappointment, distrust, despair, dysmorphia, dysregulation, disheartened, disillusioned, disenfranchised, dismissed. So many of the men that I work with, it's the first time that they've ever had a system. The medical system doesn't work for me. I'm going from here to here to here. It's really mind blowing to them that they're not getting what they think they should be getting, and it's so dysregulating to them that the system isn't working for them, that they are really often in a state of despair. But we get to help them with the other D's, which are development, right? We help them develop new skills, develop new habits, develop new mind thoughts, discovery, right? What else can happen? Maybe you're not going to be hard. Maybe you're not going to be able to, do the things that were easy when you had spontaneous desire and not responsive desire. So, but we get to discover, we get to take them on a journey of discovery and lead them to delight.